and welcome to our morning session of our spring meeting. It's so nice to see everyone joining us again this morning. I'm sure many of you were here with us last night. Before we move into our time this morning, I have a few announcements just to get us caught up. Just a reminder that if you are not speaking, to please have your microphone muted, just to try to cut down on background noise or background conversations that might be happening in your house. If you do wish to ask a question or have a comment when those things are appropriate at times in the meeting, we ask that you use the raised hand function, which you can find under your reactions tab, which should be at the bottom of your screen if you're using a computer. If you can't find your reactions tab, you might have to look for the three ellipses, the three little dots with the more button, and you should be able to find it under there, and then can raise your hand that way. As well, I forgot to mention yesterday, but the little thing just popped up on my screen to remind me that we do have a transcript available, so for closed captioning, so you're able to click on that if you want to be able to see the words that are spoken. If that helps you in your understanding, then please do that as well. As well, I forgot to mention yesterday, but I put it in the chat afterwards, and I apologize, but we do have a couple of chaplains who have agreed to be chaplains for us for the meeting, in case there is something that causes you distress or you need to talk to a chaplain about something. And so that is Kevin Steeper and Therese Samuel are serving as chaplains. So if you do need something from either of them, you can private message them, and then I believe they'll give you some contact information if that's an easier way to have a conversation about that. As well, please use only use the chat function when you have been requested to from one of the presenters. We don't really want to use it as a general conversation or commentary on what's going on, as that can be distracting for a lot of people. The other thing that I wanted to mention, just looking at my list. As you know, we had a little bit of problem with breakout rooms yesterday. And one of the problems that we had that we've realized after the fact, but not during, is that there might have been at least one and maybe a couple breakout rooms that could hear the audio of another breakout room, which then caused them to not be able to do their work as well or at all in their breakout room. And so if that happens today when we are in a breakout room, just leave the room to come back to the main group, and we can try again. Or you can have the conversation, if it's just one group, can have the conversation in the main group as well. That could work also. But if that happens, you can leave the room and we can try to set it up again to try to solve that. And I believe the last thing that I have is that just a reminder that nominations and new business, the deadline for that is in 23 minutes at 10 a.m. And as of yet, we do not have any nominations for president-elect or for the secretary position. I'm starting to think that people don't want to work with me. This is starting to become personal, people. It's either that or I'm doing such a good job that you're like, I don't want to follow Mark. That's just, I can't do that. Maybe I'll assume it's the second. But please, if you has been something that you've been thinking about, please give it some more consideration. And if you have any questions about that, please use the chat function and private message Cheryl Ann about those, because it would be really, really great to have someone to fill those roles. So I think those are all that I have for the announcements for today. So as, I don't know if you were here earlier, we were chatting, and we are in Kincardine right now. The group that's together here in our room. And so for our acknowledgement of the land, I'm going to use one of the acknowledgements that Gord uses at King United Church. So for thousands of years, First Nations people have walked on this land. Their relationship with the land is at the center of their lives and their spirituality. We begin our meeting this morning by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe. We are all treaty people, parties to Crown Treaty 45 and a half in 1836. Keep us mindful of the covenants that have been made and broken with First Nations people. May we grow into living with respect on this land, walking into reconciliation through peace and friendship, while honoring all who live, work, and worship on it. And I believe we will move into our time of worship this morning. And so if you were with us yesterday, you know that our theme is Words Matter. And I think for some of today, we could even expand that to words and actions matter as well. And so I will turn it over to our worship group for this morning.
This worship service addresses trauma-related content, including fictionalized depictions of bullying in churches, as well as references to biblical stories and news stories of violence. We attempt to address these issues in a sensitive manner, seeking healing. Attendance is optional. You are free to absent yourself before or at any time during the worship service in support of your own personal comfort. You are not alone. You are among people who care. On October 7th, 2019, in Hamilton, where I live, 14-year-old grade 9 student Devin Selvey was fatally assaulted after school in front of his mother and died in her arms in what was originally described as a school-related bullying incident that the school had repeatedly failed to address. Within hours, it was national news. When I heard about Devin, I knew in my soul that I had to do something to be part of the solution. That led me to volunteer on the executive of Voices Against Bullying, an organization which is having a very real impact on how Hamilton schools are dealing with bullying incidents. In the course of that work, I have learned a lot about bullying and power abuse in relationships from experts in the field. Bullying is not limited to children in schools, of course. It happens to adults at work, in intimate relationships, and even in churches. Reports of bullying incidents in churches have increased dramatically during the pandemic, both laity against clergy and clergy against laity. When we are either the victim or the perpetrator of bullying as adults in churches, we're often ashamed to acknowledge it and to ask for help. And we're often not even sure where to turn for help. Well, hopefully that's changing. The learnings that we have acquired in dealing with bullying among children are transferable to adults. And one of those key learnings is that nearly every bully is themselves a victim. Bullying is a form of power abuse. Most bullies have learned to abuse power from either experiencing or witnessing abuse themselves. Bullying is often a defensive trauma response, and trauma-informed empowerment strategies are successful in reducing bullying. In the biblical story of David, we find a boy who was robbed of his power and who grew to be a man who abused his power, and in the context of a religious culture that venerated him as a hero. Far too many people know how hard it is to accuse a hero of abuse. As we encounter the story of David and connect it to fictionalized stories of bullying in the church, let us open our hearts to God. Let us pray. God of compassion and healing, embrace us now in your loving arms. Open our hearts and gird our loins to hear and acknowledge the pain in our hearts and in the hearts of others. Open us to receive healing from your Spirit through the compassionate words and gestures of those who surround us in community. In the name of the Christ who called us to love one another, all your people say together, Amen.
In the call of Christ to follow him, there was no suggestion of hiding away from life's problems in the hope that they would disappear. Rather, it is a call to honesty, to recognize the dehumanizing forces of life, and to bring healing and reconciliation. Worship is our time for honesty and for equipping ourselves for discipleship. Let us worship God.
O great Jehovah, I come before you as your humble and obedient servant. Though a youth in years, I want nothing more than to serve you. It is you who blesses me with strength and courage. With your mighty strength I fought off bears in the fields, and lions too. Fill me now with your strength. As I enter the valley of Elah, battle cries surround me. The cries of Goliath resound over the hills, and yet I fear no ill, for you are with me, great Jehovah. Filled with your strength, I know I will be safe. But why, my God, why do they not listen to my pleas? When I was a son of Jesse to be anointed as Israel's king, my father ignored me. When your servant Saul anointed me, my brothers mocked me. When I spoke of the strength that you will provide, the warriors frowned upon me. When I came before my master Saul, he laughed at my young years. Now I stand before the giant Philistine, and he calls me names. Why, great Jehovah, why will they not listen to me? On every side I feel crushed. I do not know which way to turn. What have I done to displease them? I know you will not abandon me, great Jehovah, but give me strength, give me courage to be strong at the hands of others. Listen to your cries of your servant, O great Jehovah.
Hello, Therese speaking.
Hi, Therese. It's John calling from First Middle Duck United Church.
Oh, John, yes, good to hear from you. How are things going?
Thanks. Great. Well, actually, not very great. That's what I'm calling about. Something a little difficult is going on, and I wanted to talk to somebody about it.
Oh, my.
So I don't know if you're the right person to bring this to, but you're the only person I know in the regional council as staff right now. So I thought I would give you a call and see what happens. So as you know, I'm on the M&P committee of my church.
Yeah.
And I was talking with the minister, and I'm starting to have concerns that a member of the congregation is putting some pressure on her to put hand sanitizer dispensers in the church, but we're talking really fancy deluxe kind of hand sanitizer dispensers, which I think is ridiculous to spend the money on. But she even wants to put them on the communion table with a memorial plaque in memory of her mother, who was a parish nurse in the church for 25 years or so. Anyway, I can really appreciate that her mother was a parish nurse for 25 years. But I don't think this is right. And I don't like the pressure that she's putting on the minister.
Oh, my goodness, this is a bit of an unusual situation.
Yeah, tell me about it. I think it is too. So the problem is Mrs. W is a really big donor. And you know how that goes. So I think she's threatening to push the board to reduce the minister's time if she doesn't get her way about being able to put these hand sanitizer dispensers on the communion table. And I know that if she pushes for it, it's going to happen because she's like the matriarch of the church. Reverend G and her husband have a new family, and her husband is taking paternity leave for the first while. And I know that they can just not afford to have the minister's time reduced. They would end up leaving the church, I'm sure, and I would hate for that to happen.
Wow. So this is such a complex situation and a heavy load for the MNP to carry. John, I'm really glad that you reached out for help. You are right. I'm not the person to deal with this. This is not part of my portfolio, but I am glad that you've reached out, and I can connect you with the staff people who can support you through this.
Oh.
So both, actually, two people, the pastoral relations minister and the executive minister, are both really gifted to help you with this. What I can offer is to contact them both, and then one or the other will get back to you to follow up. How does that sound?
Actually, that sounds pretty good. I'm sorry that you're not the person. Like I said, I just wanted to contact someone, but I really appreciate it that you would put me in contact with the right people.
Yeah, and you were right to call me, because part of my role is connecting you with the people who can help you if I can't. So I'll send it right as soon as we're off this call, and let me know if you haven't heard back from one or the other of them by the end of next week.
Oh, okay. That sounds great. I really appreciate knowing that help is close by.
Help is always close by. John, I trust that they will be able to help you with this, but can we take a moment and pray?
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Great and loving God.
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
Welcome. Welcome, counsellors, to the court of King Julez. As you know, I have ruled this nation of Garth with wisdom and with strength for many years. And never in all my years have I known a man like David. I perceive this man to be manipulative, to be a liar, and to be dangerous. And I would appreciate your counsel on how best to handle him. When I first met David, he cunningly allowed me to think that he was mad. He scratched at the door, and he allowed spittle to come down his beard. I know now, of course, it was simply a ploy so he could escape, and I should have learned then about his manipulative behavior. Some years later, he came to me again to seek refuge from Saul, and he swore his loyalty to me. He whittled his way into my confidence, convinced me to give him the city of Ziklag. He was very charming. I did as he wished, and I can see now he was just trying to cover up for his dirty deeds. And now he comes again. He comes and he gives me reports of how he has attacked Judah and its allies. He even brings me spoils such as camels and sheep and donkeys. All appearances would say that he has proved himself to be abhorrent to his own people, and one would think I should trust him. And yet, I swear that he thinks if he lines my pockets, then he can do whatever he wants. I am convinced that he is lying, and he is simply trying to protect himself. I've even heard it said that David has used his own position to attack Israel's enemies, not Judah's. Of course, David would never agree to this, and he leaves no man or woman alive that could ever possibly say anything against him. I truly do not know what to believe, and I am just not sure what to do. I do not know how to handle his behavior, but I know that if I do nothing, if it goes unchecked, then it will be destructive. And so, I have called you together at this royal council to share with me your wisdom. What do you think is the best way to move forward?
Hi, Diane. I'm the chair of MNP, and I have a problem that I'm hoping you could help me with.
Hi, Nancy. I'm happy to try and help. What's the problem?
Well, it's about our minister. So the MNP committee got a letter saying that there was a problem at a recent worship committee meeting, and we heard the minister was bullying the members of the committee.
Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so committee members are still kind of shaken by what happened, and one of them has even refused to come back to the committee or even to church until the minister apologizes. We just need some help, I think.
So let me say first, I'm glad that you came, that you reached out for some help, because one of my roles is to support MNP committees as well as ministers. You mentioned the word bullying. Can you give me a few more details about what might have happened?
Yeah, sure. From what I understand, they were talking about upcoming worship services, and our minister was just getting more and more upset and agitated. Then the minister went off on this lengthy rant to get the committee to decide in their favor, to do what they wanted to do.
So in your experience, has this kind of behavior been brought to your attention before?
No, we haven't heard of any other incidents like this or any similar behavior.
Right.
Of course, we know our minister, like a lot of people, has been under a great deal of stress because of the pandemic, and MNP have been offering support, but there have also been a lot of extra other responsibilities the minister has had to take on to get the worship service online and dealing with our safe spaces team, things like that.
Right. Yeah. So lots of stress happening. When MNP committees get a letter like this that's signed by folks who are willing to stand behind it, I always recommend that you meet with the minister and discuss the letter, the contents of the letter, so that they are aware. Maybe the minister already realizes that they went overboard in their reaction.
Yeah. I think they are sorry about it.
Yeah.
And regret it. Yeah.
Yeah. So sit down, have a conversation with your minister as the MNP committee, and explore what happened, and if there's undue stress in his life that maybe led to this, or just to understand the context.
Okay.
And then what are you going to do? So part of it is you making sure that the minister has the support and resources they need, but also how are the relationships going to be tended, having had this rupture in the relationship. So we always encourage the folks to try and handle this at a more informal level. Okay. Would the minister be willing to have a conversation with the worship committee about what happened, or write a letter of apology to the folks who were distressed, particularly distressed by the behavior. And it may be that they come to a better understanding and a willingness to work together again. There is a policy called the Workplace Harassment, Discrimination, and Violence Policy that was initially, it was mandated by the Ontario government to help create safe workspaces. And it is for our churches, both for ministers and other staff, but also for the volunteers, like the lay leaders who really work in the church on a volunteer basis. So it encourages this more informal approach first to see if people can restore the relationship and think deeply about their behavior.
Yeah. So like not a formal complaint kind of thing.
No.
First, right?
Right. Okay. However, if it's needed, like if it isn't possible to reconcile this way, it is also possible to make a more formal complaint under this policy, a complaint of harassment.
And that would be the committee people would do that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, the people who are affected by behavior. And in the case, if it were a lay person harassing a minister, for example, that would be something that would go to the executive minister of the regional council. But in the case where there's a complaint against a minister, if it's written formally, that would go to the Office of Vocation Minister. But I think, the informal would be more what Jesus talks about when your brother or your sister harms you, to go and speak to them about it. And if they won't listen, take someone else with you. Yeah. So it might even be that a member of the MMP offers to be part of a dialogue.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable and a good place to start. Because can we ask you for any help with the first steps in getting this conversation going?
Yeah, if you need, please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, Diane. Thanks. I really appreciate the help.
Okay. Blessings.
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
I know. I shouldn't even be talking to you. If my mistress Bathsheba finds out, I will be fired on the spot. She's not been herself recently. She sleeps all the time. And when she is awake, she just sits there in silence. It's like she's so depressed, like the weight of the world is on her shoulders. She's such a wonderful mistress to work for. She laughs and sings all the time. And she's so much in love with her husband Uriah that beauty just seems to exude from her. But not anymore. Not since she visited David. I was there, the day when they came into the courtyard. I just finished bathing and dressing my mistress. And all of a sudden they just burst in. And they demanded for her to go and to them to David. My mistress knew that it was wrong for her to go to another man's house without her husband, and she pleaded not to go. But they grabbed her by the arm. What was she to do? It was the almighty David that was summoning her. She tried to protest, but they grabbed her so forcefully. As she left, I watched her look over her shoulder at me, and I could see in her eyes that she was pleading with me not to say anything to her husband. I don't know what happened over there. I don't know what happened between Bathsheba and David. But I can be certain of one thing, that he forced her and he coerced her into submission. David used all of his power and his gender and his might. She was so vulnerable. What could she do? How could she possibly stop him? He does everything he can to take things that don't even belong to him. My mistress said nothing to me, but I noticed. I noticed the bruising on her wrist when she returned, when I was bathing her. And I noticed how she is swelling within. A baby within should be such a joyful thing. It should make you laugh and dance like she used to. But Bathsheba doesn't dance anymore. She's too afraid.
I'd like to introduce Reverend Cheryl-Ann Stadelbauer-Sepa, Executive Minister, and she will be reviewing a complaint that has been received under the United Church of Canada Workplace Discrimination, Harassment and Violence Policy. Thank you, Cheryl-Ann, for your support. Please.
Thank you, Chair Lily. As Lily explained, I'm your Executive Minister, and in that role, I receive complaints in this policy. In any complaint, there are two parties, the complainant, the person who is making the complaint, and the respondent, the person about whom the complaint is being made. On March 1st, I received a written complaint in which Mr. David Solomon was named as the respondent. That complaint was submitted by someone who had worked with a consultant who had helped determine that this situation could be considered under the policy and who supported the complainant as they wrote the complaint to submit it. Another consultant was then appointed to accompany Mr. Solomon, and the consultant then met with Mr. Solomon to deliver the complaint and supported Mr. Solomon as he submitted his reply. Once I had these two pieces, it was clear to me we needed more information. So at that point, an investigator was appointed. Investigators are trained to deal with these matters, and the investigator then met with each of the parties, going back and forth between them to gather information. At the conclusion of the investigation, a report was written with the finding, and the finding was that Mr. Solomons had indeed breached the policy and the complaint was upheld. That result was shared both with the complainant and with Mr. Solomon. The written report from the investigation then went to the Regional Council Executive, who made the following decisions and directed me to share them with you today. Mr. Solomon is to be removed from all positions of leadership until he successfully completes the boundaries training for lay leaders. Once he's done that, he is required to meet with 3 designated members of the executive who will want to assess the impact of that training on his understanding and his behavior. Additionally, the governing body is directed that you may not transfer his membership until he has met this requirement. The executive also requires the Ministry and Personnel Committee to participate in training with the Minister Pastoral Relations within the next 6 months. As the governing body, your role starts now. Your job is not to reinvestigate what happened. That's been properly done and decisions have been made. I appreciate that you all signed a confidentiality agreement before this evening's session. Your focus now is on how you strengthen and heal the congregation from this point forward. How do you help the congregation develop a code of conduct where such activities will never be repeated? How do you help heal some of the wounds and divisions that have been felt? How do you restore the congregation to health and well-being? Please know that as your regional council staff, we remain available to assist you with this. Any questions?
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome to this TED Talk on recognizing behavior. I'm sure that many of you here at some point have had an aha moment when you recognize something. And that can sometimes be a good thing. But what about the times when you recognize your behavior as being a perpetuation from something from childhood? And I don't just mean licking the spoon because your mother always did it. I mean those times when your behavior and your pattern can be destructive to yourself and to others. My name is Nathan. You can call me a prophet or a wise counsel, a doctor, or even a pastoral support minister if you wish. But whatever you call me, you need to know that what I'm telling you today is not a science. It is just a story that could be true of any one of you gathered here. Let me share with you a case study. Let's call my client David. David came to my office and he had the weight of the world upon his shoulders. It seems like all of his life events were somehow just catching up on him. His deep inner child that we all know so well had been treated by how he had been treated by his father and his brothers or his siblings. It was catching up on him. He told me that all his life he had to prove himself. And prove himself he did. He became a fearless leader. He became victorious in countless battles. He became a powerful and mighty ruler. But somewhere along the way, David crossed a line. He seemed to lose his moral code. He killed innocent women and children. He plundered foreign lands. He raped and took other men's wives. And of course, he lied, cheated, and manipulated. But what made him do it? How could a young boy who at some point had sung songs to God go so far off the rails? Well, as you ponder that, let me tell you this story. There was once two men that lived in the same village, a rich man and a poor man. The rich man had many, many herds, cattle, sheep, you name it. But the poor man only had one small female lamb, a small ewe. And that poor man loved that little ewe. He nursed it, he fed it, he kept it warm at night, he brought it up like it was his own dog. Then one day, a visitor, a stranger, came into town to stay with the rich man. Now the rich man did not want to kill any of his own flock or herds to give to the stranger. And so he took a ewe belonging to the poor man, killed it, and gave it to the stranger. Well, you can well believe that that action of the rich man showed absolutely no pity. But ask yourself, what made him behave in that way? And could that behavior have been prevented? Well, as you ponder that story, ask yourself, where is my client David in that story? And why did he act in a way that he did? Could it have been prevented? Each of us gathered here have a story to tell. And sometimes each of us need to pause, to step back, to carefully look at ourselves, and to take time to recognize our own behavior. And then we can move forward with new insight. Thank you for listening.
What brings you to see me?
I need someone to talk to, and one of my colleagues suggested I give you a call.
Sure. What's up?
Well, this is harder than I thought. Okay. I've been slogging my way through the pandemic over the last 2 years, and I thought I was doing good. But the other night at the council meeting...
Take your time.
Well, the other night, I just lost it. We were discussing a small issue, and I started berating the other members of the council for their lack of commitment, for leaving me to take on more and more responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And how are you feeling now?
I'm embarrassed by my lack of self-control. But even worse, I'm deeply ashamed of my behavior, of the way I used my words to bully them. I put myself over them and judged them.
Use the word bully to describe your behavior. Have there been other incidents besides the one at the council meeting?
When I look back over the last year, there have been other incidents as well. I've cut people off and put people down, especially in those times when my decisions were being challenged. But the incident at the council meeting, it was the worst.
So how can I help?
I'm just so ashamed of what I've done, and I don't know at this point. But I need your support.
Well, I am here to support you. And the fact that you called me would seem to indicate that you're deeply troubled by what you've done, remorseful even. You've said a couple of times that you're ashamed of what you've done. Would you say this is true?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that there have been other incidents as well as the one that brings you to see me. And you described your behavior as bullying. So I'm left to wonder, what was going on there? What was that behavior in service to?
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised
Today, we start by just acknowledging the ugly truth in our midst, for we cannot change what we do not acknowledge. If you have been hurt, or if you have caused hurt, please speak to somebody you trust. Your regional staff are here to support you. Peace be with you.
Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love me, I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. God, replace my stony heart with a heart that's kind and tender. Oh, my coldness and fear, to your grace I now surrender. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love me, I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. Write your love upon my heart. As my love, my goal, my story, in each thought, word, and deed, may my living bring you glory. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love me, I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. May I weep with those who weep. Share the joy of sister brother in the welcome of Christ. May we welcome one another. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love me, I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart.
And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord be kind and gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen.
I want to thank everyone for their participation who put that video together. Very appreciative of the time that it obviously took to get that ready for us. We are now going to move into a time of break to give people a chance to digest with what has happened, and if someone does need to reach out to one of the chaplains, again, that is Kevin Steeper or Therese Samuel, please private message them in the chat. You can do that over this time, and then we will come back from that break time, have a little bit of business, and then have another presentation. And so I have 10:29. We'll assume that's 10:30. So let's come back at 10:40. And there, Therese has just put her info in the chat box. So if you need to call her, you are able to do that, or direct message her as well. So take the time to get up and stretch, and we'll see you back at 10:40. And our recording is going again. I hope you were able to take some time to have a stretch and walk around a little bit. We are going to move into our next bit of business for this morning, which is the electing of our officers to all the different positions. And so I believe Heather Leffler, who is part of the nominations committee, is going to help with this, and Terry as well, our chair of agenda and business. So if we could ask Heather to unmute yourself, and maybe you can talk us through what we're doing.
Thank you, Mark. It was a privilege to work with Jennifer Irving and Tim Rayburn, and I'd ask you to keep Tim in your prayers as some medical concerns at this time. But Jennifer and I received expressions of interest from members of the court, and we have prepared a slate. I would invite folks to look at the positions. We intentionally left, I think, not able to scroll, Sue, so if you could scroll a little bit. Yeah, so we've left places so that you know that there are still spaces. We're looking for a president-elect, a secretary, folks on each of the commissions, Covenant, Human Resources, and Mission and Discipleship. And I believe there's a space on executive as well, but I could be wrong about that. But we're very excited for the people that have put their names forward. And we hope that some of you will consider finding ways that you could serve. If you're not sure about a commission or the executive, you could contact President Mark or the chairs of the commissions to learn more about that work. Before I make the motion to accept the folks that we have, I would like to thank those folks that are completing terms. You have made a big difference in the life of our church, and we're so grateful to you, and pray that you'll find other ways to serve. Especially want to note Rod Coates, who has been our secretary through the transition into regions and through this first term in the regional council, and we're really going to miss his puns. We just thank you all for your work. So at this point, I would move that the following people be appointed to these offices. Brent Kaslek as a second term as our treasurer, Jennifer Irving as a member at large of the executive, Nicole Cottrell an extension on the Human Resources Commission. We know that he will be moving into a staff position with us, but he wanted to continue to help serve the commission until that time. And grateful to have Andrew Hyde and Mary Hawthorne on the Mission and Discipleship Commission. So that's my motion, and Terry is going to second it.
Excellent. So we will be voting on that in a moment by poll again. That will come up, and you can click on yes or no. I note in there that the president-elect position and secretary position are still vacant, and so at this time, then, we won't have anyone filling those roles, and we will, I'm sure, be continuing to try to do that, and hopefully we can do that at our fall meeting.
Mark, I might say that if you aren't feeling called to a role yourself, you might look around and see who you know that could serve, because sometimes we need a nudge to move into.
No, correct. And the nominations committee, even though they did a spectacular job, might not necessarily know everybody in the region and know everybody's gifts and skills in the region. So if you know someone, then please, give them a tap on the shoulder and say, hey, have you thought about doing this? So before we vote, does anyone have any questions for clarification or questions at all for this this slate of people. Please use your raised hand function if you do have a question. Again, under the reactions tab, or you might have to click on the 3 dots that says more to find reactions, and then raised hand is under there. Mary Ellen Parsons, do you have a question? Oh, it went down.
Oh, I did not.
Okay. I think people were testing out the button, so we know it works, because as soon as it went up, I was on it. So you know the raised hand function works. So that's good. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions then. So could we get the poll up, please, for voting? And you have the option to vote yes or no. Okay, we'll give about 15 more seconds. It looks like everyone has voted, but we'll give it a bit more time just in case someone is. Can you repost the motion, Sue? Okay. We can. It'll just be a second. So we'll leave the poll up until we can get the motion reposted as well. Oh, while the poll is up, it turns out Zoom will not let us. While the poll is up, it will not let us share a screen.
Sue, could you read the motion for us, please?
Sure.
Thank you. That'd be helpful.
Bear with. Move that the following be appointed to these offices: Treasurer Brent Kaslik for a 2nd term, Executive Member at Large Jennifer Irving, Human Resources Commission McCall Cottrell to July 31st, 2022, Mission and Discipleship Commission Andrew Hyde and Mary Hawthorne for a 2nd term.
Thank you, Sue. All right, we have had 111 people vote, and there's 126 people on the call, so that will say that is a majority of people who have wished to vote have. All 111 have voted yes, so that has carried. We will covenant with our new members and our existing members later on this afternoon, but I will echo Heather's thanks for those who put their names forward and for those whose terms are ending at this current time. All right, that is our. I was really hoping we were going to have like 5 people for president-elect, and we were going to have a good conversation and get to. But we'll plan for that for the fall. That'll be good. So we are now going to. Just check my agenda. We're now going to move into, we have another workshop that is focusing on Our Words Matter. This one is looking at respecting pronouns. And so I'd like to introduce the leader for this workshop for us. So if we could spotlight King Julez as well, please, that would be spectacular. You might have to turn your camera on, King Julez, in order for us to spotlight you as well. There we go. So this is King Julez. They are MDiv student, drag clown. They're chair of Affirm United, and they are also the Children and Youth and Families Program Animator at East Ends United Church in Toronto. And we are thrilled that you are able to lead us in this and take us through this presentation. Welcome to our gathering, and I will pass it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you all this morning in this virtual space. One of the joys of doing things virtually is being involved in communities that I'm not physically a part of. So this is really quite lovely to meet all of you, sort of, and be with you here this morning. I am going to share my screen and we'll kind of kick things off. At any point, if you have questions or comments or anything, please feel free to use the chat function as you wish, or your raise hand function. I will also be putting my email and other contact information in the chat. So if you have any questions or comments or want to chat at any point after this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm very reachable. So let me just get this going here. just okay. So as somebody myself who is trans and non-binary and involved in the drag community, pronouns are a huge part of my life and have been for quite some time. And funnily enough, pronouns are a huge part of all of our lives. It's just a matter of, have we, put a lot of effort into thinking about them? Have we had to think about them before? Why are they important? What are they really? Okay. Next. So, Mark gave a little bit of an introduction to me. I wear many hats. I am the chair of Affirm United, Ensemble, so you may have seen some of our promotional materials with myself in there. I'm on the board for Student Christian Movement, which is another national organization. I am a part of the planning committee of Spiritual Drag Con, which is a brand new event that's being put together by drag spiritual leaders from across the states, a few of us in Canada, and it's a very exciting time. We're putting this together with the hopes of, bridging the two streams of our lives that are and historically have been so separate. And that's what a lot of my ministry is about. That's why I'm here as my drag persona with you today. Long-term goal is to be an ordained minister as my drag persona and kind of bridge this gap that's been so entrenched for so long. And I do children, youth, and families ministries right now at a bustling congregation here in Toronto. And we are an interfaith center. So I've been learning a lot from the Jewish community that shares our space, from the Universalist congregation that shares our space. And it's really just quite a lovely experience. So we'll start with a little disclaimer or a preface here for all of you. You are not a bad person or a homophobic person or a transphobic person if you simply have learning to do, right? We all start somewhere, and this is meant to meet you where you're at and guide you through some of those beginning stages of thinking about pronouns, or maybe you've thought about it a little bit and this is a chance to learn some more things. If you do feel overwhelmed by any of this information at all today, that is completely natural. There's going to be a large amount of information covered in our time together today, but I promise we're going to work through it together and come to a place where it flows together. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions or comments at any point during or after the presentation, please reach out to me. And lastly, using and practicing new pronouns or different pronouns for somebody that you know takes time, and that's okay. It will require an active effort on your part to push through learned habits of gender assumptions, of various roles that we've seen and participated in our lives, or default pronouns that we think about. But it's all worth it in the end, and it will take time, but it's worth it. So there we go. So personal pronouns are the pronouns that someone uses for themselves. And so someone's pronouns can tell you a lot about their gender, how they wish to be represented in the world by themselves, by other people. It can also speak to the lack thereof, right? Some people use certain pronouns to dictate they don't have gender, or they would rather not be seen as somebody with particular genders. So there's a variety of ways that pronouns are used, and it's important that we think about that and we acknowledge those situations. Many folks who are not transgender or who are not gender nonconforming, so a lot of cisgender folks do not think about pronouns very often. It's not always necessary, and that is one of the privileges that being cisgender has. And it's important to acknowledge and recognize that in yourself. Again, having that privilege is not a bad thing, but it's something that's important to think about and important to acknowledge in yourself and in other people in your life. Using someone's correct pronouns is a way to show respect and a way to create environments that are welcoming, that are inclusive, that are safe, that are brave. All of these descriptors for space that we try to embody, that we try to bring forward wherever we are, at work, at school, at church, in our various social groups, etc. Sometimes, creating unwanted nicknames, right, can become offensive and even harassment for folks. In the same way, assuming or ignoring someone's pronoun can have that same effect. And a lot of folks that, face this on a daily basis, it builds up, right? These are common microaggressions that people face that really affect a person. I'll just insert a little personal anecdote here. As somebody that presents very feminine, my hair is quite long. I do like to wear eyeliner sometimes, And I get called girl, woman, she a lot. Just about every person that sees me assumes that about me. And, on days that I'm working in my public facing job, I'll go an 8-hour shift and not being gendered correctly once. And it really builds up, right? And it really layers and layers and layers. When we speak about people in the third person, pronouns are a way, as I mentioned before, that folks express themselves, whether that be part of themselves, their whole selves, but the pronouns themselves are not gendered. And that's something that we've learned, right? She is girl, he is boy. And that's something that we have to aim to unlearn. There are a lot of non-binary folks or gender non-conforming folks, for example, that use he or she, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a boy or a girl, but that's just a pronoun that feels most right to them. So there's a lot of layers to various pronouns and how they're used, and it's important to engage in that conversation with people. The other point, is many, as I mentioned, often make assumptions about gender based on how a person looks. But as I've kind of touched on in my personal anecdote, how we look doesn't really say anything, right? And again, that's another piece that we need to unlearn. Throughout history, it's sort of changed, right? High heels were originally made for men to take photos, right? As we learn about Louis, the kings of France, and all of that sort of history. And then over time, it's kind of migrated to be a feminine staple. All of these ways that people present themselves and express gender has changed throughout history, and how someone looks doesn't dictate really anything about them other than how they want to look. So we're going to go into a couple breakout rooms throughout the course of this workshop. So the first breakout room discussion that we're going to be having are just a few simple questions that are up here, and I'll input them into the chat as well. So I invite you, once we go into the breakout rooms, to share with your group, what are your pronouns? Have you ever thought deeply about your pronouns or what they mean to you? And no is an okay answer. I want you to know that. It's okay if you haven't, but it's important to acknowledge that. And if you have thought about them or you're thinking about them right now, how do your pronouns reflect how you wish to be represented in the world? How do they represent you? So we'll have about 5 or 6 minutes in our breakout rooms, and then I invite you to, when we come back from the main room, maybe share some of your insights in the chat so you all know that you're not alone on this journey and we're all in this together here.
Maggie is our equity support person. So Maggie, do you have a question?
I do. Well, not a question. I just really appreciate the presentation and all that's been shared. Just one point that might be helpful. You had mentioned microaggressions. So that might be a new idea or new word for some of us. So would you say a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Maggie. So microaggressions are very complex. So it's used to represent common, often daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental even situations. Some people call them slights. It could be offhanded things that people say, jokes that are made. For example, a building not being accessible to mobility aids would be microaggressions against folks that use mobility aids. That sort of thing. There's quite a lot of examples, but these microaggressions, whether they are intentional or unintentional, they communicate potentially hostile or derogatory or negative attitudes towards communities that are marginalized or oppressed or stigmatized. So trans folks being one of them, the disabled community, racialized folks, all of the communities that are marginalized and or oppressed have forms of microaggressions that they face daily.
Thank you. I just noticed that Bobby has her hand up as well. Do you have a quick question, Bobby? And then we can let King Julez.
No, it wasn't a question. It was just a comment. For me, I found it awkward to use the pronoun they, but now I'm feeling much better. And I mean, my friends have corrected me. My friends are very, very helpful. And I did find that awkward, but now I get it. The other thing is I work with somebody who is trans, and I have used the wrong pronoun from time to time. And this person is so understanding. I always obviously apologize profusely, but it's again, she's just been great, and I just so appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing. There was a note in the chat that perhaps some folks may not know what the word cisgender means. So I'm just going to give a brief about that. So cisgender, the prefix is actually cis and trans meaning different and cis meaning same. So transgender folks identify differently than the gender they were assigned at birth. And cisgender folks identify as the same. So if when you were born, the doctor said, this is a girl, and you still identify that way, then you are cisgender. That clears that up.
Thank you very much.
I first learned about those prefixes actually in chemistry class in high school when we were learning to draw all these molecules. So, and if you hear any little noise, that's my rabbit over there, and I apologize if that's distracting, but he's a very rambunctious boy. So thank you all for participating in that first breakout room and for sharing some of your thoughts. If you feel so moved, please do share some of your thoughts and feelings in the chat. I would love to keep up with you and keep up with how you all are feeling and how you all are doing throughout the course of our time. I'm going to share my screen once more, and we'll continue on and go into another breakout room in just a little bit here. I'll open this up a little bit more. Okay, so now we're going to talk about effort a little bit. So there are two forms of effort that folks often take when it comes to pronouns. So there's extra effort and there's excessive effort. And so there is a little bit of a difference there that I'm going to talk about with you. So situations where one notices the call for an accommodation, a call for difference, are ones typically where a behavior is pointed out that maybe has never been pointed out before. So this includes things like we were talking about of a change in pronouns, maybe not making certain jokes anymore, maybe, changing our assumptions about things. Often when people are asking for this kind of accommodation or change, the person that we are asking to change has never really heard that before. And that's okay, right? We all start somewhere. So the extra effort that one would take is the labor that is felt to be unremarkable and justifiable by the person asking for that change. Whereas the excessive effort, for example, is felt to be remarkable and unjustifiable by the person asking for this change. So it's not that the entailed action is different necessarily, but the felt legitimacy or the demand that is holding the person accountable is what is different here. So when you're making that effort to change, it's important that you do take that little bit of extra effort, because change requires effort, right? It can be hard, it can be difficult, especially when you've been doing something for 5, 10, 15, 30, 40 years. Changing that is hard, and it will require some extra effort. But on the flip side, putting in too much, right, and trying to overpower the situation or trying to offer effort that the person who is asking you didn't ask for can actually not help the situation. So something that is important to me as somebody that uses they, them pronouns is the depoliticizing of the word they, of the pronoun they. And for some of you who have been on the earth longer than me, this has been a conversation that maybe you haven't had before, or maybe has been sort of heated in your lifetime between yourself and some other folks. And again, that's totally okay, right? Times change, vocabulary changes, the communities we're a part of change. And so this is an important piece of this conversation. But we're going to go to our other breakout room first, before we get into some of the details about they, them pronouns and some other pronouns as well. So this breakout room, you will have a little bit more time than the previous one, so you can think about it a little bit more and offer a little bit more into the conversation, hopefully, if you didn't get the chance to offer too much in the last one. So these questions are a little bit different. The first one being, When was the first time you met someone who uses they, them pronouns? And if it's today and that person is me, that's great. I would love to know that. The next question is, how do you feel about using these pronouns regularly in your vocabulary? How have you felt possibly in the past? And the third question, which is sort of a bonus, is have you ever met someone who uses neo-pronouns? So this is a different category of pronoun that not a lot of people have heard of. So if this is a word that you've never heard before, you are in the majority. These pronouns are also sometimes called noun self pronouns. So this is a whole new category that people are using when identifying and labeling themselves. So these include it or its pronouns, sie, zer, fey, fair, a few different options that are outside of the he, she, they pronoun category that many of us are used to. So have you ever met somebody that uses those pronouns? Have you ever heard of them before at all? So I will put these in the chat before you all head out, and I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. Or actually, maybe, is it easier for folks if they're in the chat or if we do the broadcast like we did last time?
Broadcast only stays up for a short time.
Okay. I'll put them in the chat.
And while King Julez is doing that, I'm just going to mention that we're giving more time in this breakout room, which does mean that we might go a little bit past 11:30 because we have one more thing to do once King Julez has done their presentation. But I wanted to give the appropriate time needed to this presentation and to our chance. You're not getting a lot of extra time in the breakout room. It might only be 1 or 2 extra minutes. So please note if someone wasn't able to share the first time, to allow them to maybe share first this time around. But just so people are aware of that, King Julez also has a hard out by 11:30, so we'll make sure that we're accommodating that as well. Are we ready? Perfect.
Thanks for being with us today. If I don't get to see you before you need to leave.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really lovely to be here.
What I might recommend, I think everyone is back now, or getting close to being back. What I might recommend, King Julez, is just because I know you don't have a lot of time left, maybe if you want to, if you're willing, share an email in the chat, so then if people have questions, they can maybe reach out that way, as opposed to asking questions right now, because I'd really like to hear the rest of your presentation before you have to go.
Yeah. For sure. I will do that. I also do have a slide with all my information on it as well. So it...
Yes. See, you're already ahead. All right, I'll shut up and let you finish. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So folks coming back from the breakout room, thank you so much. If you wanted to put some of your answers into the chat that you discussed, I won't necessarily read them out loud, but it'll be cool for you all to engage in that way, and for me to even just read some of your answers that you discussed in your breakout room. And again, then you all can know that you're not alone in this, and won't have any shame in maybe not knowing things, because there might be 100 other people in this room that don't know it either. So moving along. There's a large question and a large conversation socially right now about pronouns being political. And there's a cultural shift sort of happening right now, at least in the Americas, where people are beginning to drop their assumptions about other people's genders. Or at least, we're hoping that it's more widespread. So pronoun usage and the way that we use and engage with pronouns and supporting folks in their pronoun usage isn't a political commitment. And it's not worthy, of notice or extra praise. It's an ordinary expression of extra effort, right? Not excessive effort that is, too much or remarkable or anything like that. But it's a note that you are putting in the effort to change. You're putting in the effort to be respectful and to engage with how the marginalized community of trans and non-gender, non-conforming folks, are asking allies and cis folks to engage. Cis being short for cisgender, just so we're there. So something that I recommend to people is a shift in your vocabulary to using they, them as default for folks who you don't know their gender. You haven't had that conversation with them. You haven't yet asked them what their pronouns are. In doing that, you allow that person the freedom to share with you how they identify. And you're also giving them the freedom to not, right? If they don't feel safe coming out, if maybe they're not ready to come out yet, they maybe don't know their pronouns yet. If you shift to assuming a neutral playing ground for everybody, you're giving people autonomy. You're giving people freedom. And that looks like, oh, that person over there, they left their water bottle on the desk. Maybe we can call them to come and get it back, right? I work at a restaurant sometimes, and when referring to people in the line, it's like, oh, this is for that person in the red shirt. They have this combo number, right? I don't know if that person is a man or a woman, and how they look isn't going to tell me that. And I haven't had a conversation with them. They're a stranger. So in doing that, I'm giving them that freedom. I'm not making that assumption about them, and I'm letting them express themselves how they want and how they see fit in the world. In 2019, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary released their word of the year, and it actually was the word they, right? The publisher has said, English famously lacks gender-neutral singular pronoun to correspond neatly with singular pronouns like everyone or someone, and as a consequence, the word they has been used for this for over 600 years. This isn't, a new thing. Many of you, I'm sure, have used it in a singular way and just haven't noticed before because it's become so natural and such a part of your vocabulary. When you're talking about somebody that you don't know and you have no indicators of who they are, we've used this. And it's just in a more direct form that people maybe haven't been exposed to yet. And one of the senior editors has said, people were clearly encountering this new use of the word in this way that I'm describing and turning to the dictionary for clarity and for usage guidance, which of course makes sense, right? You don't know what a word means. You don't know how to use it. You go to the dictionary. You go to the thesaurus to see other words that are like it. So the dictionary took a stance and said, okay, this is the word of the year, and we're going to help kind of to normalize this and to make sure that people know that it's a part of our English language, has been and will continue to be in new and not so new ways. So your region, your statement, right, is here on the left. Safety, sanctuary, unconditional love. Towards the end, you're committed to resisting all forms of oppression, welcoming and celebrating people of various sexual orientations, genders, and all others who are marginalized. Being faithful followers of Jesus means caring for the marginalized and the oppressed, which is reflected in your statement here, and I'm sure something that we can all agree on, something the United Church talks about. Being an ally in that same sense to transgender and gender nonconforming folks means taking the time to learn and get to know differences, means taking the time to put in that extra effort to unlearn some of the things that we've learned in the course of our life, whether that be as a teacher, that be as a social worker, that be as a lawyer, that be whatever you've done in your life and whoever you are. We've all learned things about gender and how gender exists and how gender, and I'm going to put this in quotations, should exist. We've all learned a lot of things, and it's about unlearning that and listening to the people that are directly affected by things like improper pronoun usage. The next few slides are some frequently asked questions that I get. So if one of your questions is here, I'm happy to answer it for you. I noticed some of you are adding things into the chat, and I'm grateful for that. So be sure to read up on each other as well as we continue through this presentation. So the first one is, how do I know someone's pronouns? It's a very simple answer. You ask. It's not impolite. It's not rude. If anything, it's the kindest and most polite thing that you can do as anybody, right? And it's important here too that you don't just ask people who, and again, I'm going to put this in quotations, look queer, right? Add this into your vocabulary and the way that you introduce yourself. Say your name, say your pronouns. When you ask somebody else their name, also ask them their pronouns. It's important that we engage in this dialogue with everybody, and not just with folks that are queer, and not just with folks we think might be queer, right? It's important to make it a part of our everyday normal interactions. I notice some of you have your pronouns in your Zoom name. That's great. Another place would be your email signature, right? Another place would be your, if you're on social medias, in your bio or in your biography, that goes on there. It's important to have pronouns be a part of the conversation all the time. What do I do if I make a mistake? That's okay. Everybody does, like I've been saying. If you make a mistake when referring to someone, simply apologize, correct yourself, and move on, right? There's no need to say or do anything more than repeat your sentence with the correct pronoun. So say I'm talking about Mark and I accidentally say she, and Mark corrects me and says, actually, that's not my pronoun. It's like, oh, sorry, okay, yeah, Mark left his water bottle over here. And then move on, right? You don't need to continue to apologize or make it larger than it is. It's important to just keep going and acknowledge that you made the mistake, correct it, and move on. This shows folks that you know that you made a mistake, that you're willing to fix it, and that you're not making this situation about you, right? At the end of the day, someone correcting you about their pronouns is them being vulnerable with you, is them saying, hey, if we're going to have a relationship, if we're going to continue to have a meaningful connection, this needs to change, and this needs to be corrected. How can I practice to make sure I get someone's pronouns right? So maybe someone in your life is transitioning, or someone uses pronouns that you've never seen before. How can you practice to make sure that you get it right? So you make sure that you're putting the effort in all the time. If you make a mistake, like the previous slide, you just correct yourself and move on. It's important that you practice referring to this person correctly when they're not around. That's a really key piece of this. So I always tell people, if you are finding that you continue to make mistakes, every time you do make a mistake, try to say 3 different sentences to yourself where you refer to this person correctly. And I hope that makes some sort of sense. So say, I'll use my example again, that I use the wrong pronoun for Mark. Once Mark and I finish our conversation as I'm walking away, I say, okay, Mark, he, him. Mark, he is going to work. He left his water bottle on the table earlier. He likes spaghetti, maybe. And I say those sentences to myself to practice a little bit and to get that into my vocabulary, that Mark, he, okay. And once you start doing that, it'll come so naturally to you, and will continue to come naturally, and you won't even have to think about it anymore. All right, coming up to the end of things here. I have 2 different emails, so if you wanted to email me with questions or comments about the Affirming Ministries program, about your ministry becoming affirming, continuing to be affirming, please find the AUSC co-chair at Gmail. That's the Affirm email. Any and all other questions, inquiries, comments, requests, just want to say hello. My personal email is there. I'll put them both in the chat right now for you all. Make sure I spelled those right. Yeah, so both of those are in the chat. As I've mentioned, I love to talk about this, and I love to engage in these conversations. Here's some of the things that I talked about today. If it's helpful, I can forward also the link to my PowerPoint to Mark, and potentially he can send it out to you all if that's something that you would like as well, just to have some of those pieces for your reference so you can take a look at them as you kind of move forward. Thank you so much for having me here with you this morning. It's been such a blessing, and reading the chat, it's really great to see you all engaged and engaging with this material. Yes, you can find me on Facebook. I think if you search up King Julez, you'll probably find me. I'll put my human name in the chat as well. So if you wanted to find me on Facebook, I'm there too. yeah, I would love to get to know you and hear your questions and see how you are continuing your ministry, both as an Affirming region and for those of you that are part of Affirming Ministries. This is really important work. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, King Julez, for your presentation today. We really appreciate it. And to mention to people as well that this has been recorded, so if you weren't able to get anything down, when you look at the recording, you'll be able to go back and find that slide again and get all that information that way. I know you have somewhere to go, so I know it's a quick goodbye, but we are so grateful for your time this morning. And to what you were saying, when I wrote down your introduction, I made sure to write they every time to make sure, just as, like you said, to practice, right? Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that you commented on that as well. Spaghetti's okay. It's not my favorite food, but it's not bad. Thank you so much. Blessings on the rest of your day.
Thank you, folks. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you so much. So as I said, we are moving a little bit into our lunchtime, but we had an hour and a half for lunch, and I am making the assumption that people would rather have a slightly shorter lunch than have a longer afternoon. So we just have one last thing to do this morning, and then it will be our lunch break. Also, for our lunch break, we are going to have breakout rooms open. This time it'll be you can choose to go to a breakout room if you wish, and that's just if you want to have lunch with someone else and have a conversation. Thank you, Past President Gary. That is excellent. If we only had an hour for lunch, it would be different, but an hour and a half gives us time to work into it a little bit. So there will be breakout rooms that you can go into if you want to chat with people, have your lunch with others, as we normally would do if we were at an in-person event. And if you don't want to, then you just don't join a breakout room, and that's fine. You are welcome to either leave the Zoom meeting at lunch or just turn your camera off, and if you're not joining a breakout room, and do that as well. So I will now invite our next part of the day to go.
When did our fighting begin? Well, if you ask our mother, she would say our fighting began while we were still growing in her womb.
Can you blame me? Who wants to share such a small space with such a hairy beast of a human for 40 very long weeks?
Grow up, Jacob. I was born first, the oldest, the birthright, the blessing of our family should have been mine. How telling, though, that when we were born, my dear brother was grasping at my heel. a sign of deceptive games that he would play later in our lives.
Seriously, Esau? Give it up. I was a baby. Growing up with Esau was hard. He liked to hunt like Dad, and he was good at it. He got all of Dad's attention and affection. He was constantly teasing me for spending time with Mom and learning how to prepare meals and offer hospitality.
You think that was easy for me? Sure, Dad loved me, but Mom, she only had eyes for her baby Jacob. I heard you two talk about me laughing at my body hair. Once, when we were teens, I returned home from hunting to find Jacob making stew, and the smell was so tantalizing. I was near fainting from hunger. I asked him to share some with me.
That's what you think happened? You demanded I give you stew. The implication was pretty clear. While you were out working hard, gathering food for our family, I was merely preparing to feed you all. Making that much stew and bread for our family isn't as easy as you might imagine. I wanted you to know the value of my work.
My birthright? That's what you asked for in exchange for a bowl of lentil stew and a piece of bread. That which was rightfully mine.
You gave it to me, didn't you?
It's child's play compared to what you did when Dad was dying. Dad had sent me to the field. He knew his earthly time was drawing to an end, and he asked me to prepare a meal for him so that he might bestow a blessing on me before he died. And why don't you tell them what happened next, you schemer?
Mom overheard what Dad said to Esau. She told me that she would prepare goat and cover my skin in the skin of the goat. She urged me to put on Esau's clothes and to take for myself the blessing that Dad had promised to my brother. I did as she told me to do. I deceived our father on his deathbed. I'm not proud of it.
And when I returned from the field to receive my blessing, Dad told me he had already given my blessing away. He told me Jacob would be the father of many nations, and I would serve him. There's nothing left for me. I wept bitterly.
In fear that Jacob would come after me, in fear that Esau would come after me to avenge what he had lost, I fled. I left all I'd ever known. I ran never to return. And as I ran, I wept for all I had lost. My mother, my father, my twin, my home, perhaps even a piece of myself.
It was Sunday on June 25th, 1950. When we were about ready to go into church, we heard the bomb explosion near, and our house was shaking. We prayed together for ending the dreadful war and bringing peace and joy of the Korean Peninsula into the world.
For the Korean people, World War II was never really resolved.
So the USSR came from the north and the USA came from the south, and Korea was divided.
The division and hostility between the North and South has been one of the profound root causes of all political, military, social, and economic problems of the Korean Peninsula of today.
It is time we put on end to this 70 years long war. Our hope is ongoing for reunification with peace.
한국에서 평화되어야 하늘에도 평화를 될 수가 있습니다. 거꾸로도 그래요.
I didn't plan ever to return. But one night I had the strangest dream. I dreamed of a ladder that was stretching from the earth to the heavens themselves, and angels came and went from the ladder. In this dream, the Lord spoke to me saying, I am with you, and I will watch over you whenever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. When I awoke, I vowed that if God would be with me, I would make the journey. I would return home, and I would face my brother.
And in those intervening years, much happened to both of us, as life is. We took wives, children, grew older, more gray. One day, after many years, messengers from Jacob came to me, hoping to find favor with me. The next morning, I met my sisters-in-law, the children of Jacob, and then I saw him, my brother, bowing to the ground before me.
Esau threw his arms around my neck. He kissed me and called me brother. I dissolved into tears in his strong arms. So many years, so much history and pain.
My brother. My arms ached to hold him those long years. And now he was here, seeking my forgiveness, my blessing. As long as I live, I will never forget my brother's words to me when finally we were reunited after years of anger and grief and division and so much lost time. Jacob looked me in the eye and said, to see my face was to see the very face of God.
It'd be lovely to say that Esau and I kissed and made up and years of heartache were forgotten. Life is rarely ever that neat and tidy, though.
But that day, we turned a corner, made a start. The walls that divided us came tumbling down. The lines of communication opened up. And finally, it felt like reunification was not merely a possibility, but a reality.
Finally, we saw each other clearly, beloved children of the God of mended relationships.
Brother to brother, family to family, nation to nation.
Heart to heart. As a student who studied history, it was a shock to me to discover that for those on the Korean Peninsula, the war never ended. 70 years of political, cultural, social war. 70 years of families divided, of relationships broken. 70 years is 70 years too many. And so the United Church of Canada has taken on a challenge to add 10,000 signatures to an appeal for peace on the Korean Peninsula. As President Mark moves us into break time, we urge you to sign the petition, to add your name, and to take this link back into your home communities and to encourage others to sign on, that relationships may be mended and that we might come together once again, heart to heart. May it be so.
Thank you very much, Diane and Kathy, for leading us in that time. So we are now at our lunchtime. So please feel free to take that time to sign that petition. If you're a General Council Commissioner, you may have done so already, as that was done at our General Council meeting. But please take the time to do that. Enjoy your lunch, and we will set up breakout rooms that if you want to join, you just have to click join and you can choose what room you join to. So if there's someone that, I haven't talked to them in a long time, and you see them in a breakout room, you can join that room. I don't think it'll be I don't want to go in that room, but maybe you can join where you want or not at all and just have a break. And we will see you back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you all so much.